Thank you to my channel members and Ko-fi supporters that make these videos possible. You can also support me by buying a deck tech on my weekly Tuesday and Sunday streams. More info in the video description. Hello everyone! I normally don't have that much trouble building decks. When I have an idea for a commander and I feel like I've gotten it to the perfect build that does what I want, my normal next step isn't, well, now time to play it. It's only true that the ones that challenge me the most are the ones that translate into paper. Kellan Daring Traveler is one of those decks for me. Not because he's necessarily hard to build around, or because the cards he works with are weak, but the opposite. He's generic, and has a lot of potential that can be tapped into while still having a large amount of restriction. Released in Lost Caverns of Ixalan, Kellan is a 2-mana 2/3 human fairy scout. When he attacks, you reveal the top card of your library, and if it's a creature with mana value 3 or less, you can put it into your hand. Otherwise, you may mill it. Kellan also has an adventure for 1 green that makes X+1 map tokens, where X is the number of opponents who control an artifact or enchantment. On the surface, this commander is boring, and it is. That's part of what I love about it, though. And Kellan, at first glance, doesn't ask anything of you besides to run low mana value creatures. Maybe you build him with an exploring theme, but there's a secret third thing about him. He wants you to have stuff to mill. Now, I should briefly touch on what made me pick Kellan as a commander. As always, I tend to find the most success with working with the way I want to win first and then moving backwards. On the recent, or next, Magic Mirror podcast, I don't know if this video will come out before or after it, I touched on my favorite 2 cards. Elesh Norn Grand Cenobite and Bruna the Fading Light. Now, most people know that Elesh Norn has a little brother now in Kudo King Among Bears, which turns your board into 4/4s and your opponent's creatures into 0/0s. But according to the stats of Gaddock Teeg, not a lot of people seem to realize that he is similarly Brizella Voice of Nightmare's little brother. With both in play, Gaddock Teeg and Brizella form a Hate Bear lock that prevents any spell besides creatures with mana value 4 or greater from being cast. This and the Kudo Elesh Norn synergy is what I wanted to build around. My first thought was to build around Kethis, the Hidden Hand. I still don't think this would be a bad way to build this deck, to be clear. The cards Final Parting and Buried Alive are second only to 1 for setting up the Brizella combo, and all the cards mentioned have been legendary, so it would make sense. Part of what Kethis offers too is that he lets you cast the spells. Simple reanimation doesn't work since Bruna has a cast trigger, not an ETB. I ultimately decided against Kethis in the end though because of budget and because of his reputation as a combo commander, making him rather kill on sight, and therefore kind of vulnerable. My second option was Sigarda Font of Blessings, with the card I hinted at earlier, Congregation at Dawn. With the Congregation, you could stack the library to be Gaddock Teeg, Bruna, Gisela, then draw Teeg for turn, and deploy the angels from the top. The deck would have to be more in on humans in this case though, and it was also super expensive. 13 total mana to deploy the lock, and Sigarda also doesn't help cast the Elesh Norn Kudo half of the equation, so I ultimately decided against this one. It was at this time I gave Selesnya one final chance before I just threw in the towel and used Kethis. I hopped on Scryfall, and that's when I realized Kellan would be the perfect guy for the job. Remember when I said Kellan can be a good commander if you have stuff to mill? Well, Gisela is exactly that. Congregation at Dawn can be used to stack the library, Bruna, Gisela, Gaddock Teeg. You can then draw Bruna for turn, use a map or attack with Kellan to mill Gisela, then draw Teeg the same turn or next turn depending on how you ditch Gisela. In this case, with Kellan's help, your lock would only be 9 mana to deploy, a very achievable sum for a green deck, even quite early in the game. Now that we've talked about the deck's finishing moves and how I landed on Kellan, I figured I'd talk about the advantage packages, starting with the commander himself. Kellan, if you want him to be more than just a mill engine for literally 1 card in your entire deck, needs to have a 99 full of small creatures to consistently draw you cards. So naturally, I built him as a Hate Bears deck. Gaddock Teeg and Elesh Norn already thrive in that environment anyway. With a creature toolbox like this, which are honestly some of the fairest strategies you can see in Bracket 3, you need to eke out every bit of advantage you can out of your cards or else you will get crushed. I only cast Kellan's Adventure on turn 1 if my hand has a curve that starts at 3 and therefore needs him to be my turn 1 and 2 plays. Most hands, I'll play Kellan as a 3-drop that makes 2 to 3 maps. The deck as I have it now includes 38 creatures of mana value 3 or less that Kellan can spin off the top. This doesn't include cards like Gisela, Ephemerate, or Karmic Guide though, that I'm actively fine with just milling anyway. So, as a value engine by himself, Kellan hits pretty consistently. Two cards that are untouchable in my mind, besides the finishers already laid out, are Recruiter of the Guard and Thalia's Lancers, which both can tutor for Felia and form a value engine with her, practically giving you access to any card you could possibly want in the deck. Thalia's Lancers obviously can grab you either game-ending Hate Bear combo by itself with Felia, but Recruiter of the Guard can get the Elish Norn combo one easily, since you can get Fierce Empath to retrieve the Norn and Recruiter itself gets Kudo. Recruiter has the upside of grabbing a wider swath of creatures than Lancers. It's able to get Recursion, Draw, Protection, Removal, Fogs, or a slew of Hate Bears that honestly is too long to list. But Thalia's Lancers, despite its reduced flexibility, still has the higher ceiling. This is far from the only engines I settled on for the current version of the brew, however. Currently, the list has two engines similar to the modern deck Green-White Ritual. It has Birthing Ritual to spin Hate Bears or ETB creatures that have shot their shot and aren't needed anymore into more useful ones, but it also packs Eternal Witness and Ephemerate, which can give you a free flicker every turn for the aforementioned ETB creatures. And it also gives the top-end wins more resilience to counter magic and other forms of removal. Not to mention the more mean route of using it to loop Fogs in the Elish Norn waiting room. These two engines are not only harmonious with one another, the Ritual fills the graveyard and the Witness returns from the graveyard, but these engines also all consist of only good cards. By themselves, Ephemerate, Ritual, or Witness are not cards that feel painful to draw. And yes, they're generic cards, but the intrigue doesn't come from analyzing any one of them in a vacuum. It comes from analyzing them in the context that they're being used. People think, I need card advantage, and automatically reach for Beast Whisperer. Or they think, I need protection, and automatically reach for Mother of Runes. To be clear, both of these are in the deck, but the deck also has these more wacky multi-card synergy packages that also achieve these effects, winning combat and creating advantage respectfully. Spirit of the Labyrinth? Yeah, boring generically good hate piece. Spirit of the Lab with Kellan, who gives advantage without drawing, or turning Lauren the Third Path into a one-sided draw engine when used on opponent's turns? Hilarious. Esper Sentinel? Boring generically good card draw engine, but with the maps that Kellan makes giving him counters or Kudo turning him into a 2/2? Hilarious. I could keep going about how every creature in this deck has 12 or so synergies with other cards in the deck, like how Kudo has a job outside of blowing up the game with Elish Norn by practically giving Felia or Kellan unblockable with all the counters the deck can generate. Not to mention literally giving them unblockable with Champion of Lamholt. Or how Aven Mindcensor and Winds of Abandon are just good cards by themselves in this style of deck, but together they induce a true Plague Wind combo for mono white. But I need to move on to the other thing that has me transfixed by this deck that takes the generic like this and warps it into cool synergy, and that is what's currently on the cutting room floor. I used to run a Woodland Bellower package in the deck, for instance. The Bellower could grab removal, even in the form of Knight of Autumn, who was a Reclamation Sage, yes, but could also be sacrificed to Flare of Fortitude, Eternal Witness, a Game Ender in the form of Champion of Lamholt, or Fierce Empath to grab one of my top enders. During this time, too, I ran Sun Titan to grab with the Fierce Empath to loop Fog creatures with. Now I run Redemption Choir in place of Sun Titan, and more Ramp and Solitude in the places of Woodland Bellower and Dryad. It is these micro decisions, warping the deck to be worse in one way, but better in another, that keeps me hyper engaged with Kellan. I didn't cut these cards because they were wrong. It's just that there was another right answer that I couldn't run with this other right answer, lest I sacrifice my hyper low curve. I even have these feelings about cards I haven't tried out yet, but I'm excited to. I want to use a Bright Glass Gearhulk Skull Clamp package someday. Perhaps a more one-drop heavy build with Ranger Captain of Eos, or with 6 to loop these creatures. I have a feeling that this version of the list would use Analyze the Pollen a lot better than my current one does. By doing these small changes, you're also shifting the context of all the cards around it, which is super interesting. What if one day I decide to cut Flare of Fortitude for Ghostway? Well, now Eternal Witness has a new friend, but Analyze the Pollen will take a hit in those situations. It's exciting to see micro changes like this suddenly shift so much about how the deck can play while still keeping the identity at its core. The deck, as it's currently built, is linked in the video description. I plan to get a written primer up for it soon. I'm also excited to hear all the ideas you have for the deck and how you build Kellan yourself if you're interested in him. Let me know, is there a commander out there for you that seemingly has endless possibility? What painful cuts have you had to make in the past? Thanks for watching, and until next time, bye!